The Crimson Gauntlet fell silent. Not the hushed anticipation of a typical fight, but a thick, suffocating silence, heavy as a neutron star, born of primal, instinctive fear. Even the raucous alien spectators, the hulking guttural Krog, the chittering insectile Sylvans, the serpentine Lacerians with their flickering tongues tasting the air, seemed to hold their breath, their multifaceted eyes wide and fixed. Then, the heavy blast doors at the far end of the arena groaned open, a sound like tectonic plates grinding, tormented metal screaming against tortured seals. From the abyss beyond emerged it, Grimfang. He wasn't merely led, he was contained, a force of nature barely leashed. Two hulking figures in Void Serpent Syndicate power armor, their visored helmets reflecting the flickering neon, strained against thick energy restraints. Blue light pulsed along the restraints, biting into Grimfang's monstrous flesh, yet even they seemed to vibrate with the effort of holding him. He moved with a slow, deliberate menace, each footfall a bone-jarring tremor that resonated through the ferrocrete floor, up through your teeth, into your very soul. Chitinous plates of obsidian armor, ridged and brutal, covered his alien hide, catching the garish lights of the gauntlet in slick, oily sheens. 4 arms, thicker than ancient Terran oaks, rippled with corded muscle, ending in claws that could rend plasteel like tissue paper. His head, a nightmarish sculpture of bone and rage, was dominated by bioluminescent eyes, twin infernos burning with cold, feral intelligence. A low, guttural growl ripped from his throat, a subsonic rumble that vibrated in the chests of every being in the arena, human and alien alike, a primal promise of violence. The air itself seemed to crackle with his barely suppressed aggression, charged with the static of impending carnage. This was Zargoth's ultimate weapon, the bioengineered Cathar mutant known as Grimfang. And tonight, Jax Boyka Rykov, the human fighter who had clawed his way from the gutter to legend, was about to face him. Humanity was about to face him. But to understand how Jax Rykov, once hailed as the Unbeatable in Nova Kaivax's combat spire, found himself staring into the abyss of Grimfang's eyes in a backwater dustfall outpost fight pit, we must rewind. Weeks earlier, in the chrome and neon canyons of Nova Kaivax, Jax had been more than a fighter. He'd been a force of nature, a whispered legend in the spire's brutal underbelly. He moved with balletic violence, a whirlwind of precisely calibrated force, each strike a calculated detonation. His Rolex chronospace, a prize from a forgotten victory, glinted like captured starlight under the arena's brutal illumination as he systematically dismantled opponent after opponent. That night, it was Kalen Vance who stepped into his storm. Even in the locker room's sterile chill, anticipation coiled in Jax's gut, tighter than a void serpent. His prayer ritual, not to gods, but to the cold, hard geometry of combat, to the angles of attack and the physics of force, was shattered by the bloodthirsty roar of the gathering throng beyond the steel door. He entered the ring, the air thick with the metallic tang of ozone from energy weapons and the acrid, animalistic musk of a dozen alien species crammed together, hungry for violence. Vance was a formidable opponent, muscle and fury, but Jax was a hurricane. Fists collided with sickening thuds, bodies slammed against the energy field perimeter, and the crowd's roar became a physical pressure, pushing down, demanding more. Victory was swift, brutal, inevitable. Jax Rykov, the Unbeatable, bathed in the roar, yet a cold unease already prickled his skin. Meanwhile, across light years in the uncaring void, in the iron cage of the Voidhold orbital prison, another kind of spectacle unfolded. Kashmar, a mountain of inmate rage and muscle, was unleashed in the prison's gladiatorial pit, a brutal theater for the galaxy's dregs. Opponents, hardened criminals, genetically modified brutes, desperate souls, fell before him like harvested wheat before a scythe. One, a young human barely more than a boy, pushed past his breaking point, crumpled to the ferrocrete and didn't get up. Jax, seeking a phantom absolution, a whisper of peace in the cacophony of his life, sought out the sanctuary of the human spirit in Nova Kaivax. He anonymously donated a hefty sum of credits, hoping to buy something. But the sanctuary's elder, his eyes holding centuries of quiet wisdom, his voice a low, resonant hum, told him charity was not salvation, not for a soul stained with blood. Violence, the elder said, each word a measured weight, is never the answer, Jax. Jax's jaw tightened. This, he said, gesturing to his calloused fists, this is my gift. To waste it, to deny what I am, that is the true sin. The elder simply looked at him, a profound sadness in his gaze. Then the chrome and confidence of Kiri Voss, his manager, materialized in the sanctuary's quiet courtyard, disrupting the fragile peace like a sonic boom. Kiri, radiating manufactured excitement in his impeccably tailored Armani Stellaris suit, practically vibrated with news. Cosmopolis Prime, Galactic Championship Scouts, they were blown away by your last fight. A legitimate tournament. A gilded staircase leading to the Pan-Human Galactic Combat Championship, to glory beyond the Spire's blood-soaked sands. That night, Jax fought Vance again, for qualification, for a fleeting taste of something more than just survival. The arena became a kaleidoscope of brutal motion, a dance of desperate strikes and calculated counters. Vance fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, his every blow fueled by a raw hunger for victory. But Jax was a predator honed to lethal perfection. The knockout blows came in a brutal flurry, each impact echoing in the suddenly hushed arena. Then another. Vance, fueled by a desperate, almost suicidal need to qualify, dragged himself back to his feet, defiance flickering in his glazed eyes. Jax, seeing the man's shattered spirit, the raw, broken humanity beneath the fighter's mask, pleaded, a rare crack in his granite facade, "Stay down, Vance. Please, I don't want to hurt you anymore." But Vance, driven by a force beyond reason, beyond self-preservation, lunged again. The final blow was a mercy, swift, brutal, and irrevocably final. Victory. Qualification. But the roar of the crowd was hollow, a vast, empty echo in Jax's soul. Syndicate scouts, faces impassive behind mirrored visors, were impressed. Cosmopolis Prime, the glittering jewel of the Pan-Human Federation, beckoned. Kiri practically vibrated with triumph, slapping Jax on the back and thrusting a data chip, fat with fight credits, into his hand. Leaving the arena, the roar of the crowd fading behind him, Jax saw Vance being stretchered away, a grim-faced medic barking orders into a comm unit, the unspoken verdict hanging heavy in the air. The next day, the sterile calm of Jax's apartment was shattered by Kiri's somber comm call. Vance was dead. Just a fight, Kiri shrugged, his voice devoid of empathy. Accident. Not your fault, Jax. But the Sanctuary Elder's words, the weight of Vance's broken defiance, the hollow echo of the crowd's roar, it all converged. A crushing weight of guilt settling in Jax's gut, a cold, hard knot of remorse. He demanded Vance's personal effects, a worn, data-chipped photo. Vance, beaming, arm around a woman whose smile held the warmth of a dying sun. A crumpled letter, a physical artifact in a digital age. Return address Stark. Dustfall Outpost, Xerxes 7. Jax stared at the address, a cold certainty settling in his heart. He knew what he had to do. Redemption, if it was even possible, lay not in the glittering arenas of Cosmopolis, but in the dust and despair of a forgotten colony world. Fake passport, Jax's voice was a low growl, steel-edged. Dustfall Outpost, Xerxes 7. Kiri sputtered, disbelief warring with dawning understanding. Cosmopolis, the championship, your dream. Jax's gaze was unwavering, fixed on some distant internal point. My dream died in that ring, Kiri. I'll be back when I'm done. In Dustfall Outpost, under the oppressive ochre sky of Xerxes VII, Vance's funeral was a bleak, windswept affair, as desolate as the mining settlement itself. Alma, Vance's widow, stood a solitary figure amidst the handful of mourners, her face a mask of grief, her eyes dry and empty. Then he arrived. Zargoth, Void Serpent. Syndicate slime incarnate, accompanied by a hulking enforcer who radiated menace like heat off a fusion reactor. He leered at Alma, his gaze possessive, predatory. "Vance's debt," he drawled, the words like acid. "Remember our arrangement." He offered his twisted, vile bargain, marriage to Zargoth himself, for the forgiveness of a debt Vance had accrued trying to build something good in this forsaken place. Alma's spine straightened, a flicker of defiance in her dead eyes. "I'll work it off," she spat, her voice raw with pain and fury. "At your club." Back in Nova Kaivax, Kiri, shaking his head but ultimately loyal, handed Jax a flawlessly forged ident chip. Jax boarded a grimy SpaceX freighter, one of a million workhorses plying the void, bound for the Xerxes VII system and the dust-choked hellhole of Dustfall Outpost. At the intersystem border post, bored, underpaid officials and outdated security protocols were easily bypassed. Dustfall Outpost was a grim, crushing reality, a testament to human desperation and the Syndicate's parasitic reach. He rented a Spartan cubicle in a hab block, the air stale and recycled, and hung a simple tarnished crucifix, a family heirloom, not a beacon of faith, on the wall, a silent plea to a god he no longer believed in. He found the address from Vance's letter. The Hope Beacon Community Hub. He saw her. Alma. Instantly recognizable from the faded photo, yet etched deeper now with lines of grief and hard resolve. Then a sleek black Syndicate hovercar, its windows tinted like shadowed eyes, screamed to a halt, and Alma was swallowed within its depths, disappearing into Zargoth's web. Driven by a desperate need for connection, for atonement, Jax followed, his boots crunching on the gritty Duracrete streets. He found himself at the Crimson Gauntlet fight pit, its entrance a gaping maw in the side of a crumbling hab block. Inside, the air throbbed with brutal energy, the roar of the crowd a savage pulse. Brutal, visceral combat raged in the pit below. A wiry, agile fighter named Rexus, a local favorite, dismantled a genetically enhanced brute with vicious economical efficiency, a whirlwind of lethal motion. Jack scanned the crowd, his gaze snagging on Alma, her face pale in the flickering neon light. He approached, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. "Alma," he said, his voice low, rough, "I came to talk about Vance." Slava, Zargoth's hulking enforcer, materialized from the shadows, a chrome pistol gleaming in his hand, a viper ready to strike. "She's busy meat. Syndicate business." He shoved Jax, a dismissive, brutal gesture. "Get lost." Zargoth, lounging in his private box above the pit, sipping synth whiskey and watching the security feeds on a Palo Alto Ethernet display, paused, his reptilian eyes narrowing. He recognized the newcomer instantly. Rykov, the Unbeatable. Curiosity, cold and calculating, flickered in his gaze. What was he doing in his arena, in his territory? Outside, under the harsh glare of the dustfall night, Slava's two hulking thugs moved in, cracking their knuckles, anticipation in their brutal eyes. Jax moved faster. Years of combat instinct took over. Disarm, neutralize, dispatch. Bone crunched, bodies hit the Duracrete with sickening thuds. Slava, surprised fury contorting his face, drew his weapon, the metallic click echoing in the sudden silence. Jax moved again, a blur of honed reflexes and lethal intent, and Slava crumpled, his pistol clattering uselessly on the ground. Zargoth, a slow, deliberate clap echoing in the night air, appeared from the gauntlet's entrance, his own guards, their faces impassive, arrayed behind him. "Impressive," Zargoth purred, his voice oily with false admiration. "You have talent. Fight for me, Rykov." Jax's gaze was fixed, unwavering. Alma. Zargoth's smile vanished like smoke in a vacuum. She is mine, human. As is this city, this arena, everything here. The air crackled with unspoken threats, heavy as the omnipresent dustfall dust. Next morning, Jax went to the Hope Beacon Community Hub, seeking not a fight, but a connection, a chance at something resembling peace. Zargoth's guerrilla guard, posted like a sentinel at the entrance, tried to bar his way, a guttural challenge rumbling in his throat. One punch, delivered with focused, brutal efficiency. Down. Inside, bathed in the soft light filtering through the dust-streaked windows, Alma was reading to a small group of children, her voice gentle, a fragile melody in the harsh reality of dustfall. She saw Jax, her eyes widening, a flicker of wary hope in their depths. She met him outside, the children's laughter fading behind her. He spoke of Vance, of the fight, of the crushing weight of his guilt. Alma listened, her face etched with a complex mix of emotions, grief, anger, something akin to understanding. She revealed Vance's debt, the syndicate loan that had funded the Hope Beacon, now a noose around her neck, choking the life out of her dream. Jax reached into his pocket, pulling out the data chip Kiri had given him, thick with blood money. He offered it to her. This, for the debt. Alma recoiled as if burned, her voice sharp with pain. Blood-stained credits. I don't want it. Leave, fighter. Just leave me alone. She turned and walked back inside, leaving Jax standing alone in the dust, the weight of his guilt heavier than ever. Driven by a desperate need to make amends, to somehow earn a sliver of forgiveness, Jax returned to the Crimson Gauntlet. He sought out Zargoth, the architect of Alma's despair. I'll fight, he stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, in your pit, for her debt. Zargoth's eyes gleamed with avarice. 3 fights, human. 1 week. Win them all and the debt vanishes. A cruel smile stretched across his face. But there's one more condition, Rykov. To truly free her, you must defeat my champion. Jax's gaze narrowed, but he nodded, a grim acceptance settling over him. Zargoth gestured towards a dilapidated gym blocks away, its sign hanging askew, rust bleeding from its edges. Train there, Unbeatable. Prepare to become expendable. And remember, human, Zargoth's voice dropped, chillingly soft. In my arena, I make the rules. The gym was a festering wound in the side of Dustfall, a place of broken dreams and stale sweat. Even the flickering Philips Dynalite bulbs cast a sickly, jaundiced light. A syndicate thug, muscle-bound and brain-dead, tried to assert dominance, to welcome Jax to Zargoth's domain. One kick, a blur of motion, and bone-on-bone impact. The thug crumpled, unconscious before he hit the grimy floor. Jax ignored him, focusing on the rusted weights, the battered training dummies, the phantom weight of Vance's death on his soul. He trained with a relentless, punishing intensity, pushing his body past its limits, seeking not just victory, but penance. That night his first fight loomed, Barrack Torvin, a veteran of the Crimson Gauntlet's brutal circuit. Torvin was quick, agile, fueled by desperation, but Jax was a master craftsman of violence. Zargoth watched from his box, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes as he witnessed Rykov's brutal elegance firsthand. Victory was swift, decisive, a brutal ballet of calculated force. Alma, her face pale and drawn, brought Jax a flask of recycled water after the fight, her movements hesitant, wary. He looked at her, seeking not gratitude, but understanding. He asked about a better place to train, the Syndicate Gym, a breeding ground for rats and thugs. A flicker of something akin to compassion softened Alma's gaze. She offered the Hope Beacon's gym, Vance's gym, a sanctuary of sorts amidst the grime and violence of Dustfall. Next morning, as Jax trained with relentless focus in the small dust-filled space, a group of children, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension, watched him from the doorway, drawn to the silent intensity of his movements, the raw power simmering beneath his controlled exterior. Then second fight. The Ozarov brothers, a brutal duo known for their vicious teamwork and disregard for rules. They swarmed him like predators, a whirlwind of fists and elbows, a relentless onslaught of syndicate-bred aggression. One brother's cheap shot, a brutal kick to Jax's lower back, crippled him, pain spiking through his spine like molten steel. He faltered, his breath catching in his throat, the arena spinning around him. Then, through the haze of pain, he saw Alma watching from the shadows, her face a mask of conflicted emotions, fear, pity, something else, hope, fury, cold and focused, surged through Jax, eclipsing the pain. He returned to the fight, a whirlwind of brutal counters, dismantling the brothers one by one, turning their coordinated attack against them. He limped from the arena, victory hard won, his body screaming in protest, Alma's haunted gaze a silent weight on his back. At the Hope Beacon, under the soft glow of energy-efficient lamps, Alma tended his wounds with a fragrant herbal paste, her touch surprisingly gentle. "You don't have to do this, Jax," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant hum of Dustfall's failing infrastructure. "You can leave this place. Leave Dustfall. Now." Jax looked at her, his eyes dark with weariness and a grim resolve. "Why didn't you leave, Alma?" he countered, the question hanging heavy in the recycled air. Alma's gaze flickered to the children's drawings taped to the wall, faded crayon images of hope amidst the dust. This is our dream. Vance's and mine," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Without the Hope Beacon, these kids, they'd be swallowed by the gangs by something worse." She turned abruptly, her shoulders shaking, and left him alone with his pain and his impossible burden. Zargoth, the scent of fear clinging to him like cheap cologne, watched Jax's relentless advance with growing unease. Desperate, he contacted Enforcer Kaido, a corrupt lawman with a hunger for power and a price for his soul. "Get Grimfang," Zargoth hissed into the comm unit. "Out of Voidhold. Bring him to the gauntlet, now." Kaido hesitated, the risk immense, his career, his freedom hanging in the balance. Zargoth dangled the ultimate bait. "Rykov, I deliver him to you, Kaito. Alive." Understanding dawned in Kaido's cold eyes, avarice overriding caution. Deal. Morning of the final inevitable duel, Jax ran through the dust-choked streets of Dustfall, his breath ragged, his back a searing fire. Kiri's comm call shattered the silence. "Jax, arena's insane! Sold out! You're everywhere! News feeds, hollow billboards powered by Qualcomm Galactic Snapdragon chipsets. Everyone wants to see the Unbeatable fall." After the fight with Rexus, Kiri rattled off, 9:45 transport shuttle to Nova Kaivax. Don't miss it. "I'll be there, Kiri," Jax promised, the lie a bitter taste on his tongue, knowing he was already trapped bound to Dustfall, to Alma, to this impossible fight. Arena lights blazed, casting long, distorted shadows across the blood-stained ferrocrete. Rexus, Zargoth's previous champion, swaggered into the ring, radiating cocky confidence, undefeated in the Crimson Gauntlet. Jax entered, his body a symphony of aches and exhaustion, but his gaze focused, unwavering, the cold fire of determination burning in his eyes. The fight erupted, a brutal, desperate dance. Rexus was strong, relentless, his blows heavy, concussive. Jax absorbed the punishment, his back screaming in protest with every impact, countered with precise economical strikes, a grim ballet of pain and survival. Alma watched from the shadows, her face a tormented mask, her heart a battleground of conflicting emotions. Victory for Jax meant her freedom, but she saw the raw exhaustion etched on his face, the toll the fights were taking, the impossible odds he faced. Rexus, fueled by desperation and Zargoth's promises, landed a brutal haymaker, sending Jax crashing to the ground, the air exploding from his lungs. He was on him instantly, a suffocating weight, pinning Jax, driving the air from his lungs. Jax, fighting for breath, for consciousness, twisted, bucked, a desperate surge of adrenaline. He broke free, scrambling back to his feet, but Rexus unleashed a spinning kick, a brutal showboating maneuver, followed by a sickening heel drop, landing with brutal force directly on Jax's already ravaged spine. Pain exploded white-hot, blinding. Jax's legs buckled, his vision swam, the roar of the crowd fading to a distant hum. Defeat, utter and inevitable, loomed, a cold, suffocating certainty. Then something snapped within Jax. A primal fury, buried deep, ignited, a white-hot rage against the unfairness of it all, against Zargoth's cruelty, against the crushing weight of his own guilt. His true skill, his unbeatable spirit surged to the surface. No matter how Rexus attacked, how brutally he pressed, Jax countered, evaded, dominated. A sequence of synchronized punches and kicks, a whirlwind of lethal motion, and Rexus, Zargoth's cocky champion, crashed to the Ferrocrete, his eyes rolling back in his head. Knockout. The arena erupted, a tidal wave of sound. Alma's breath hitched, a strangled sob escaping her lips, raw relief flooding her face. Relief, exhaustion, a grim satisfaction washed over Jax. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. But Zargoth's smile was a viper's grin, cold and devoid of any honor. Champion. Zargoth's voice dripped with false congratulation. You defeated a champion. But to free the woman, you must defeat my champion. Grimfang. Not Rexus. Grimfang. The name echoed through the arena, a wave of horrified whispers rippling through the crowd. Zargoth had changed the rules. Again. Then it entered. Grimfang. And the Crimson Gauntlet fell silent once more. The true silence of terror. This was Zargoth's ultimate weapon, the bioengineered Cathar mutant known as Grimfang. And tonight, Jax Boyka Rykov, the human fighter who had clawed his way from the gutter to legend, was about to face him. The arena blurred into a chaotic smear of light and sound. Grimfang was a leviathan of muscle and chitin, twice Jax's size, his four arms a grotesque, terrifying display of raw power. Jax's strikes, honed to lethal precision against human opponents, bounced harmlessly off the Cathar mutant's armored hide like pebbles against a starship's hull. A guttural alien roar ripped from Grimfang's throat, and he seized Jax with terrifying speed, vise-like claws digging into his ribs, drawing a strangled gasp of pain. A headbutt, bone-jarring, brutal, sent stars exploding behind Jax's eyes, his vision swimming. He staggered, dazed, and Grimfang capitalized with brutal efficiency, a colossal clawed fist slamming into his chest with the force of a demolition hammer, sending him crashing to the Ferrocrete floor. The air rushed from Jax's lungs, his vision narrowing to a pinprick of light. Darkness, cold and inviting, threatened to claim him, to finally offer release from the pain, the guilt, the endless fight. He could just let go. But then, through the haze of pain and despair, he saw Alma. Her face a mask of raw, desperate fear. Her eyes fixed on him, pleading, believing. And beyond her, in Zargoth's box, the Syndicate Lord's triumphant grin, a vile, gloating expression of pure evil. Something flared within Jax, hotter than pain, stronger than fear. Defiance. Human defiance. Not yet. He clawed his way back to his feet, his body screaming in protest, his vision still blurred but his will unbent, his spirit unbroken. He fought with a ferocity born of pure desperation, a primal human refusal to surrender. Blows rained down on Grimfang, Jax channeling every ounce of his skill, his rage, his humanity into each strike. He found weaknesses, hairline fractures in the mutant's bioengineered armor, exploiting every millisecond of opportunity. A brutal hook landed, connecting with sickening force, destabilizing the monstrous Cathar. A desperate kick, fueled by pure adrenaline, hammered into Grimfang's knee joint, sending the Leviathan staggering, falling. Jax seized the moment, adrenaline surging, his movements a blur of desperate improvisation. He dropped to the ground, utilizing brutal ground fighting techniques, a whirlwind of joint locks and pressure points, immobilizing Grimfang, twisting his arm with bone-jarring force, pushing past the mutant's unnatural resilience. Then, with a final explosive surge of power, he launched himself upwards, a desperate, spinning kick connecting with Grimfang's grotesque head, sending the monstrous Cathar mutant sprawling, tumbling from the ring, crashing into the startled alien spectators beyond. Victory. Impossible, brutal human victory, snatched from the jaws of defeat. But Zargoth, true to his nature, was a cheat to the bitter end. Even as the crowd roared its disbelief, its grudging respect, syndicate thugs, their faces masked, swarmed into the arena, converging on Jax like predatory insects. Zargoth, his face contorted with rage, grabbed Alma, dragging her towards his private box, his prize denied, his fury unleashed. Chaos erupted. Customers, alien and human alike, scattered, fear overriding their bloodlust, fleeing the sudden eruption of syndicate violence. In that moment of raw, desperate chaos, seeing Alma's terror, her eyes wide with helpless fear, something snapped in Jax again, a protective fury overriding his pain, his exhaustion, his own survival. He grabbed a discarded power bat, ripped from a fallen security guard's grip. Thugs fell before him like dominoes, the crack of the bat against bone and armor echoing in the pandemonium. A blaster shot grazed his arm, searing pain lancing through him. He whirled, hurling the power bat like a spear, a desperate, instinctive throw. It connected with brutal force, silencing the shooter, sending him crashing unconscious to the floor. Slava, Zargoth's enforcer, appeared on the balcony above, blaster raised, a sneer of triumph twisting his features. Crack. A searing lance of pain ripped through Jax's knee, his leg buckling beneath him. He stumbled, falling, but even as he fell, his hand scrabbled on the blood-slicked ferrocrete, finding purchase, closing around a discarded syndicate pistol. He rolled, firing blind, a desperate act of defiance. Crack, crack. 2 shots ripped through the chaos. Slava screamed, a choked, surprised cry, and pitched backwards from the balcony, a broken heap crashing onto the lower tiers. Zargoth reappeared, a desperate cornered animal, Alma clutched before him like a human shield, a cheap blaster trembling in his hand. "Drop it, Rykov!" he snarled, his voice cracking with fear and rage, the blaster pressed against Alma's temple. Jax hesitated, his gaze locked on Alma's terrified eyes, his own pistol heavy in his bloodied hand. He slowly lowered the weapon, the metallic clatter echoing in the sudden strained silence. Alma, in a sudden surge of courage, of pure, desperate human defiance, bit down hard on Zargoth's greasy hand, a sharp, animalistic cry ripping from her throat. Zargoth roared in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. Jax moved, a surge of adrenaline masking the agonizing pain, lunging forward, a brutal tackle sending Zargoth sprawling, Alma tumbling free, blaster fire ripped through Jax's abdomen, white-hot agony exploding through his core, knocking the breath from his lungs. But he reached Zargoth, his hands finding purchase, his fingers locking around the Syndicate Lord's throat, crushing, choking. He hammered Zargoth's face with brutal, relentless blows, a primal rage consuming him, a furious denial of Zargoth's vile power, his corruption, his inhumanity. He choked, squeezed, refused to let go, until the Syndicate Lord's struggles ceased, until the light faded from his reptilian eyes, until Zargoth was nothing more than a limp, lifeless weight beneath him. Zargoth fell, a broken puppet discarded. Jax collapsed beside him, the arena spinning, Alma's frantic voice a distant echo in the roaring silence. "Jax, hospital now!" "No," Jax rasped, blood bubbling past his lips, staining the ferrocrete crimson. "One question." He looked up at Alma, his vision blurring, pain a roaring tide threatening to drown him. "That day, we met. You asked what I wanted?" He coughed, a ragged, painful sound. "Didn't know then. Know now." He gasped, each breath a searing agony. "Forgiveness." Vance. Yours. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, closer. Void Serpent Syndicate enforcers, corrupted planetary security, swarmed the Crimson Gauntlet, their armored boots echoing on the blood-slicked floor. Cold plasteel cuffs clicked shut around Jax's wrists, a final, brutal closure. He looked back at Alma, his gaze searching, pleading. Forgive me? Her face was a battlefield of emotions, grief, gratitude, a dawning understanding, but still no words. He was led away, leaving Alma standing amidst the carnage, the echoes of violence clinging to the air like dustfall dust. Months later, in the cold, sterile depths of the Voidhold orbital prison, inmate Rykov, designation XR-472, received an unexpected visitor. Alma. He stared at her through the reinforced plasteel, stunned, disbelieving. Alma. The children, Hope Beacon? He asked, his voice rough, unused to conversation, echoing in the sterile visiting chamber. She smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes, chasing away the shadows. She held up a data slate, displaying childish drawings, vibrant crayon explosions of color against the gray backdrop of dustfall. They're thriving, Jax. They ask about you. They call you a hero. She looked at him then, her gaze direct, unwavering, holding a depth of understanding that both comforted and unnerved him. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I was lost in hate, blinded by grief. But you showed me. There's still good in the galaxy, even in the darkness. You showed me. Humanity. She paused, her voice soft but firm. I forgive you, Jax. And thank you for giving me my freedom. For giving them hope. A profound, unexpected peace settled over Jax Rykov. A quiet stillness he hadn't known since before the spire, before the fights, before the blood. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement, gratitude welling up within him, a fragile bloom in the wasteland of his soul. He thanked her, his voice a low murmur, and turned to walk back towards the echoing corridors of the Voidhold, back to the harsh reality of his confinement. But even in the brutal depths of a galactic prison, even stripped of everything, Jax Rykov, the human fighter who had faced monsters and demons both alien and human, remained unbeatable. His spirit unbroken, his humanity intact, a flicker of defiance in the face of a cold and uncaring galaxy. And in the silent depths of his cell, he knew, with a quiet certainty, that even here, even now, the fight was not over. A profound, unexpected peace settled over Jax Rykov, a quiet stillness he hadn't known since before the spire, before the fights, before the blood. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement, gratitude welling up within him, a fragile bloom in the wasteland of his soul. He thanked her, his voice a low murmur, and turned to walk back towards the echoing corridors of the Voidhold, back to the harsh reality of his confinement. But even in the brutal depths of a galactic prison, even stripped of everything, Jax Rykov, the human fighter who had faced monsters and demons both alien and human, remained unbeatable. His spirit unbroken, his humanity intact, a flicker of defiance in the face of a cold and uncaring galaxy. And in the silent depths of his cell, he knew, with a quiet certainty, that even here, even now, the fight was not over. Whoa. Grimfang, huh? Yeah, try telling him to subscribe. Didn't work for Jax, and probably won't work for you either. But hey, you can still make a smart move. Unlike Zargoth, if you dug watching humanity get punched in the face by the galaxy and still come out swinging, then smash that subscribe button and join the human vanguard. We've got more HFY stories coming that'll make you stand up and cheer for the underdogs of the universe. Don't be a bystander in the galactic arena. Become a vanguard.